Greetings, class. We're on the tail end of Lahiri, so good job making it this far, and we are almost finished. This week we are covering 3 stories. We're covering This Blessed House, which is actually my favorite story in the entire book. We have the treatment of Bibi Haldar, and the third and final continent. So if we look at the first story, This Blessed House, I really like this story a lot. I think it's so well written and clever. It's about an immigrant couple. They don't really know each other that well, and they're in the United States, and they purchased this house, and they keep finding these religious figurines. The story starts on page 136. So let me turn to the page. And it starts with that. It starts with exactly that. It starts with the wife, Twinkle, who says, guess what I found? And says it's roughly the same size. It's an effigy of Christ, roughly the same size as a vinegar bottle. And the husband, Sanjeev, he doesn't really like it. He doesn't like that his wife keeps finding these things, but she wants to keep it. And rather than keeping it in the house, like on the chimney mount or something like that, she decides to keep it in her office. And it's almost like an Easter egg hunt where they just keep finding more and more of these things while they keep living there. They find things underneath plywood and all these strange places. And I like this line on page 138. It's in the middle of the page. It says, he studied items on the mantle. It puzzled him that each was in its own way so silly. Clearly, they lacked a sense of sacredness. I like that line. I think that's a very powerful line. So they're Hindus. So they're not into this at all, but they kind of lost their way a little bit as they moved here. They're trying to get settled down, and they're trying to get anchored, and instead of getting anchored in their culture, they're getting pushed into all these religious icons that, quite frankly, the husband doesn't like at all. And I love it. And as the story unfolds, I like the line on page 147, and it really speaks to the relationship. It says he did not know if he loved her, and so they're a new couple. They've just gotten together, and they're both foreign, and they're trying to make sense of this new home and new life. And he's never really loved anyone before, so this is a whole new experience for him, and he's trying to get settled down with this woman, and keeps finding all these strange things in this house. And later they have a party. They have all these people come over, and the wife is explaining, or the woman is explaining that she keeps finding all these things, and they go up to the attic, and they find something else. They find a big headed figure of Christ. And so again, it's outside of bombardment by all these religious icons and things that don't represent them at all. I couldn't imagine moving to India and finding all these places in my house. I wouldn't know what to think about that. It would be very strange, but I do like the ending, and I like the way this story pulls together. And at the very, very end, even though he hates these things, he finds this appreciation in her. That she loves little things, and you know, she's into making this house nice and peaceful. And I think he just likes her ability to find joy in little things. And then I love the page 157 down at the bottom, the way the story ends. It says, Sanjeev pressed a massive silver to his ribs, careful not to let the feather hat slip, and followed her, which means they're going to stick together. They're going to make this last. So they started not quite on shaky ground like some of the other couples we've seen, but they're trying to work things out. And I like that ending because it's a very happy ending. It's a positive. It's a subtle happy ending. The next story is the treatment of Bibi Haldar, which is a very similar story to another story. What was it? Borimal that we read earlier in the book. This one is Bibi Haldar, and this is about a woman who lives in not quite a stairwell. What was it exactly? I want to get it right. She lives in a storage room with these people, and basically she's not a caretaker in the same sense, but she does do some chores and things like that around the place. And she's not a very, this is not me saying it. The book says, this story says she's not a beautiful woman. And she gets very jealous of people who get married because this is something she wants, something she cherishes. But she's an outcast. She's an outsider. She doesn't really fit in. And she's told she's unattractive. And on top of that, she has these illnesses where she gets really hot and then seems to go into a seizure. And so I love how this story starts where they've tried all these different melodies to fix her and nothing works. And then one day on page 161, doctor says, what you need to do is get married. And so this makes her excited. He says, if you get married, this will cure you. And so she's excited, and she's putting ads in the newspaper and things like that. And she's trying to find a mate. And I love it on page 165. To get her to quiet down, Haldar placed a one-line advertisement in the town newspaper in order to solicit a groom. Girl, unstable, height 152 centimeters, seeks husband. So simple and so humble and kind of sad, actually, as well. And another thing to look at in this story, this is something, it's pretty rare when you read a story. You don't see this too often. The narrator, the POV, is not I, it's not he, it's not she, it's we. I like that. William Faulkner has a story like that as well, called A Rose for Emily. So it's a collective narrator where they're all looking at this woman, and it's a group of people telling this story. And I like that. You don't see that too often. And it kind of works like gossip, right? Which makes you kind of question the validity of this story as well, because who are these people who are telling this story? And so the story progresses, and she has another attack. And it scares people. It scares the parents in the apartment, and they're worried. And then later, a child has a similar attack. And basically, at that point, this woman becomes an outcast. They send her away. It's unfortunate. It's a lot like the other story. They keep pushing her away and away and away, and then they basically kick her out. And this story has a very interesting ending as well. And at page 172, she disappears for a while, and then they find her later. She's lying on a camp cot, and she was about 4 months pregnant. And so at the end, it says she was disgraced because she doesn't know the husband. She doesn't know who this is. But she has a child, and this child changes her life. And it makes her happy, and it cures her. That's her cure, is to have a child. It's a very, very powerful story. It's another story from, not so much an immigrant story, but told from an outsider who doesn't quite fit in because she has a disease, she has an illness, she's not as attractive, she's not as successful as the other people around. And then our last story is called The Third and Final Continent. A lot of couple stories in her book. And it's about a man who just got married, and he moves to the United States from London, but originally from India. And he's going to work for MIT. And he's looking for a place to live. Well, he just waits for his wife, and he finds a place. And there's a woman that he meets right on page 166. And she comes across as very abrasive. And old and kind of mean, to be honest. She's very blunt. Like on page 177, I only rent rooms to Harvard or Tech. And then when I first read this story a couple times, she says things like, expect you, you're punctual, I expect you shall be so with the rent. And so she's very abrasive, but at first she almost seems a bit racist as well, or just condescending. She comes across that way because Americans landed on the moon, and she's really happy about this. She's just shocked that they were able to do this because she's an older woman. And so he didn't even have time to really pay attention to this story. And she's telling him, there's a flag on the moon. And she makes him say splendid. And considering that he probably speaks in an accent, this has to be very embarrassing for him. She makes him say it over and over again, which seems very, very condescending when you first read it. But when you really get into it, she was just happy. And she wanted to celebrate this moment with other people. And then you also find out that she's here by herself. She's an old woman. Nobody's really taking care of her. She's on her own. And then on page 181, where it gets into this guy whose wife is Mala, and is an arranged marriage, and at night, the first couple wedding nights, she's just crying in bed because she misses her family, and he doesn't console her, which seems kind of cold also. And he can only think about his mother who passed away, and his mother, her husband passed away, and she just fell apart. And I think that this woman and this other woman, Mrs. Croft, she's the opposite, because she's a strong woman. She perseveres. she so she's almost a foil character to the mother in this story, and they kind of build a friendship. And later, Mrs. Croft's daughter comes by, Helen, and he realizes that she does have somebody taking care of her. And I think she's like, what is it, 83 or 85 years old? She's been around for a long time, and she says a lot of funny things. She's just an old timer. She doesn't really understand present day. Like, she finds him in his room. They're not doing anything. He's just showing her the room. She's like, well, not even that. They're just having conversation. She says it's inappropriate for two couples to be talking together without an escort or something like that. And then they ask her what would she do if she saw somebody wearing a miniskirt, and she said she'd call the cops on them. So it just shows that she's just out of touch. She's based on a different time, but she does like this guy a lot. And so his wife comes, and at first it's kind of awkward because they don't really know each other, and they move to this house, and they don't really know each other. So he's going to work, but he likes to come home to smell steam rice. Kind of patriarchal if we have to explain it from that perspective as well. But the only friend he's really made here is this old woman. So he takes his wife to see this old woman. And he expects her to be mean because she's, like I said, she's pretty mean. And she asks the woman to stand up. I'm reading page 195. And he imagines she's going to say something absurd. And then she just says she is a perfect lady. And it kind of changes the relationship because it makes them both laugh and feel comfortable. And her saying that makes him realize this woman is beautiful. She's something I need to appreciate. And so again, we have another happy ending where they come together. He starts to cherish this woman. And I also love the ending of this story. It's on page 198. It says, "Still there are times I am bewildered." And it's a comparison to the astronauts. It says, "While the astronauts, heroes forever, spent mere hours on the moon, I have remained in this new world for nearly 30 years. I know that my achievement is quite ordinary. I am not the only man to seek this fortune from far from home, and certainly I am not the first. Still, there are times I am bewildered by each mile I have traveled, each meal I have eaten, each person I have known, each room in which I have slept. As ordinary as it all appears, there are times when it is beyond my imagination." I really like that ending, and it's a nice metaphor for the moon. He's saying, I didn't do something that great, but my achievement here, my ability to meet people, make friends, live here, exist here, that's a pretty big achievement. I like that ending. It's very powerful. And so for looking at our theme of nonconformity, we have these people who are just trying to maintain their Indian traditions and lifestyles, and they're bombarded with all these images, and they don't know what to do with them. They don't know how to adjust with them. They're kind of forced upon them. So they have to deal with that. And then we have nonconformity. We have a nonconformist in the woman who, in the second story, where, she's an outsider, she doesn't fit in, and she's trying so hard to fit in. And even when she tries hard and she finds she's doing what she's supposed to do, she's still outcasted. She's still put down. But it's only after she's put down and goes away from society, almost like a Thoreau-like idea, she becomes pregnant and it changes her life. And we don't know if she quite fits into society, but we know she's happy. She's cured of her sickness. I think it was this society that was making her sick. And then lastly, if we look at the last story, I just think it's a beautifully written story, but we have immigrants again, and they're trying to fit in, they're trying to belong, and this guy just befriends an old woman who just seems mean at first. And she helps him build friendships with her and her daughter, which helps him feel more at home and feel more appreciative of his life, right? We don't know if he quite conforms into the culture, but we know, especially at the end, that he embraces it. And that's a wrap on these 3 stories. That's it. Congratulations on finishing this book. If you don't know from these lectures, I love this book. I learn from her writing every time I read these stories, and they are so, so powerful. Thank you.